cauldron, wrong turns to right. Christ the King, we hold him tight. Bush bone broth broke tonight. From the flames, sparks ignite. In the cauldron, wrong turns to right. Christ the King, we hold him tight.
Check, check, check. Woo! What's up, everybody? My name is Alex, and welcome to The Broth, the most fun, serious show on the internet. We're here live in the Cauldron, and today I'm really excited to tell you guys about some stuff. My new obsession. I always got a new one. And right now it is post-millennial eschatology and Satan's little season. And are we in Satan's little season? It feels like it, doesn't it? It sure feels like it to me. So it's going to be an awesome show. Got a lot to share with you guys. Once, as usual, the foundations of everything that I believe and everything I share with you is God's Word, the Bible. And we take it seriously here in the Cauldron. And we're going to talk about some lines in the Bible that I have been confused about since I've been into my journey as a Bible-believing Christian. And something that I think is good for us all to consider. I'm not claiming to have all the answers on this one. This is new to me. When I talk about biblical cosmology, to be clear, I am claiming I have not all the answers, but that I'm correct on that. This one, I feel good enough about it to do this. I've started meeting other people who are on the same page as me with this, and there's a lot of them. Apparently, in the last few years, it's been quite a popular area of interest in the sort of deep research, deep rabbit hole community, and I'm really feeling blessed to have found some of this stuff and to be meeting some people. I'm going to play a couple videos that'll explain some of this stuff, but I'll do that at the end. So, what happens is, so first of all, let me just set this up a little bit. What if the end times events that we've been waiting for, and not the end, and not Gog and Magog, and not the final judgment, obviously, and new heaven and new earth, that we have to look forward to. But what if the tribulation and Christ's second coming already happened, and the Antichrist, all that stuff already happened? Well, Jesus said it was going to happen before the people he was talking to all died. So that suggests something. But yeah, let's look into it. Now, where this is coming from me is there's this Bible verse, and I'll read it. And we're going to go through all of Matthew 24 because the context is important. But Christ says in Matthew 24, verse 34, "Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened." In the context of this, he's discussing, among other things, the destruction of the temple, but among other things as well. And we'll talk a little bit about the temple, no stones being turned, and what that means today as well, with the so-called Wailing Wall. Well, it is a wall, and they do wail at it. So that's kind of the main thing. But where a lot of people end up coming to this is they find out about the Tartaria stuff. And that is a very interesting and very compelling area of research where so we can all agree that there is architecture that our predecessors in the West were building that is on such a different level of what we're building that it almost seems like it must have come from something different than what we've been told. So let me get myself out of the way here. And that a lot of it, it's all over the world, and that there seems to be a unique style that's like not really explained. Now, some of this stuff is explained. Like, there's always layers to every rabbit hole where there's like a set of initial questions that people who don't know anything are intrigued by, and then come up with answers that are actually they don't realize have been already explained by the mainstream story. So I ran it, you run into this as you learn out about this stuff. You go look at this and look at this, and someone goes, "Yeah, like yes, there were buildings look similar all over the world because there were architectural movements and there was Western expansion." That's true. But there are certain styles of architecture. Here's a good example. It's just spectacular. That seem related to this Tartarian civilization. But as you keep digging, it doesn't really add up. And you find some people talking about Tartaria in a very anti-Christian way, where like the cathedrals weren't places of worship, they were power plants, and they get way out there with this. But that's when they start trying to fill in blanks and come up with like an alternate story. The questioning of the narrative that we're given, totally valid and really blew my mind. Now, I was looking into this stuff. Also, there's more than just the architecture, and then you look at the history of the buildings, and it just does not pass the smell test. Like these spectacular buildings that look like they would have cost $1 gazillion to make, but then according to like the records, it was built in a year, and it's always in the mid to late 1800s, sometimes early 1900s. And apparently they only had horse and buggies, and especially in America, like they didn't even really have the rail system built out. And that just doesn't add up. But really it gets weird when you start looking at the like history of individual buildings where they all seemed fabricated. Like all over America, there are these spectacular buildings where you look at them and you're like, who did this? Like how and why? And where was the money coming from? And this was built in 1875 when there was nothing here. There'll be a building like this, and it'll say, this is just an example, I'm making this up, but like it'll say this was built, say, in 1872, and it'll be in like St. Louis, Minnesota, and the population at the time was like 15,000 people, and the photos of it show this with nothing around it. There's no infrastructure to build this, and it just doesn't make any sense. So there's that stuff, and then you find the Christian angle of it, and people start talking about this was the millennial reign of Christ, and you take that along with the fact that all of the best art and architecture was made during this time. There's hidden there's like a hidden what do you call it? Like hidden technology aspect where there is evidence of like mercury-based energy and stuff like that. There's all these star forts, which are super cool. They're all over the world. And looking at it from a Christian perspective, it starts to seem like, maybe it seemed, Christ was, and faith in Christ was inspiring people to build these things. And it was causing people thought differently than they do now, because they were starting projects that wouldn't be completed until their grandkids were dead. And that's just not something that even resonates with us. And then, okay, so this is AI depictions, but there's the airships. And it's so fun. So I was looking at this like before, when I was becoming a Christian in 2020, and before I was committed to becoming a Catholic. And at some point, I was like, you know what, I don't freaking know, like, I need to focus on my faith. I want to learn more foundational information. I need to read through the entire Bible. I need to learn my history a little bit better, because I'm reading these things that are questioning history, and I need to brush up on my history and stuff. And then I'm like, I need to learn Catholic theology much more deeply and the history of the Catholic Church. and all of this stuff. But I wanted to revisit this because it creates a little bit of a question with the Catholic Church. So we're going to get into like the theological reasons. We're going to get into the timeline, the historical evidence, and strange things with that, and how there's a different way of looking at like there's a concept here that our timeline has been tampered with. And that would be something that you might expect if we're living in Satan's little season. So about a year ago, I felt like I learned my foundational knowledge and I started re-exploring this stuff a little bit, because if our timeline is altered, if the millennial reign already happened, the Catholic Church, which I believe is the Church of Christ and God's representation of authority on earth, you would think that they would have to be in on a deception in some way. And there's I think a lot of sort of anti-Catholic conspiracy theorists that are Christian have a much easier time with that. They just go, yeah, like that's New Babylon or whatever. But I don't believe that. I never have. Since I found that Christ is the Savior, it says the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So I had to do some more research and understand how I could square this, and I did, and I'll cover that at the end, because I got to really lay out like what it is that we think is going on here before I talk about that. So yeah, and also like in terms of this, so this is what people call it, is like the Tartarian theory, because that was the prevailing way of understanding these discrepancies for a long time, until people started taking the millennial reign angle on it. And I think people probably had been doing this the entire time, but as we know, our tech oligarch overlords are antichrists. They hate Jesus and the faith. So they will do whatever they can to censor things that are true about God and promote other things. So what I believe happened is that this Tartarian, there is something to it. There are maps. There's something going on here. But this, we got to find like a more global one so you can see the... So the Tartars are known, this is Grand Tartary. So what I think is that there is some truth to this, but that this was sort of promoted as the next layer of the onion that you unpeel when you start trying to figure out what's going on with these buildings and these strange anomalies in our history. And there's other maps where it extends even to the United States. And the official explanation of this is that Tartary was sort of a catch-all term for like Slavs or something like along those lines. And that might be somewhat true. But beneath that, if you peel one layer back, you find the millennial reign of Christ. For a long time, I did not understand really what that meant. But I knew that, usually when I differ from people, like I will take the more literal thing that the Bible says instead of assuming that the Bible is talking in metaphor, because I've just noticed that people do that. They abuse the heck out of that. And if an example of that is if the Bible contradicts like the modern consensus worldview, be it the scientific or the historic or what, all of a sudden it's the Bible that was being a metaphor. But my religion is Christianity. I believe in the Bible. My religion is not, history, the history that's in our textbooks that are owned by an Israeli publisher. So yeah, where am I going with that? The maps. Well, yeah. So let's break this down. Let's see what I'm talking about. So that's just a little introduction here, and we're gonna get into some of the gospel here. So the question is, once again, so the premise is that Jesus Christ says, "Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened," referring to things like the second coming and the millennial reign, the start of the kingdom. The other premise of that is that a lot of us have looked at some of our history, timeline things, buildings that don't make sense, stories about buildings that don't make sense, and found problems. And what this eschatology is, and kind of the big takeaway for me, is that taking the Bible seriously and literally here solves the issues. It creates it. I mean, it's pretty mind blowing, and you would think, no way, no way. No way the Catholic Church could have forgotten that the millennial reign happened, and no way that all these historians got it wrong. But if you have been, if you're red-pilled like I am, we all saw during COVID a global blatant lie be pushed all over the planet almost, and enforced to a crazy degree, while half of the world knew it was BS. And now we're seeing, I think there's hope for it not going this way, but I think people understand, if Trump didn't win, if there wasn't a populist and if there wasn't a lot of pushback and some success of the pushback in politics in the world, the true story of that would have never been told, and we all would have, our grandkids would be reading history books, talking about this deadly virus that was super lethal, and we had to get a vaccine that was super safe and all of that stuff, and we know that's not true. And if you are open to what I was just sharing about biblical cosmology and the shape of the earth, then this is not really going to be that hard to fathom. So that's enough introduction. But yeah, we'll get in some of the challenges of this view. And if anybody in the X group watches this, please let me know if I get anything wrong, or you just let me know any of your thoughts. I'm not a grifter. If anything, I kind of am a slacker when it comes to self-promotion or anything like that. And I love Christ, and I love learning about what we're talking about today. So very exciting. So yeah, Matthew 24:34. Here's a couple other quotes. Truly I tell you, this is from Matthew 16:28. Truly I tell you, some who are standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. When you are persecuted in one place, flee to another. Truly I tell you, you will not finish going through the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. That's Matthew 10:23. Now, when he says a generation, we have some context for this in the Bible. There's not other instances of a generation maybe meaning 1,000 years, or we're going on 2,000 years, at least according to the timeline that we're given on that. Do we believe him? These are Christ's words himself. Jesus is the ultimate authority. The Bible is the ultimate authority. When it's Christ's own words in the Bible, we got to take this stuff seriously. So, the question's going to be, why doesn't it look like this to us, right? If that's what happened. So let me read Matthew 24, and then I will go over the timeline as we see it. And then we'll get into some challenges and rebuttals. We will then I will do a rebuttal against the mainstream timeline. I will share some problems with challenges that we're facing with our new timeline and what we can do to try to figure this out. And then I will talk about some of the advantages, how history flows better and it solves some problems. But so what does our timeline look like in terms of being more accurate? So we'll do that. I will review our timeline, and then we'll talk about what happens next in terms of where we are in history and biblical history now. And then that'll be the episode. And then I also want to I got a clip for you at the end of Trump with an the Greek Orthodox patriarch in America. That was very cool to see. And a Joe Rogan thing, Christ posting. So yeah, it's an amazing day, man. How are you guys doing? I hope you guys are having a great day. It's a beautiful day to be alive in God's creation. So here's the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, from the Douay-Rheims Bible. And Jesus, being come out of the temple, went away, and his disciples came to show him the buildings of the temple. And he answering said to them, Do you see all these things? Amen, I say to you, there shall not be left here a stone upon a stone that shall not be destroyed. And when he was sitting on Mount Olive, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall the sign of thy coming and the consummation of the world? And Jesus answering said to them, Take heed that no man seduce you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and they will seduce many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye not be troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be pestilences and famines and earthquakes in places. Now all these are the beginnings of sorrows. Then they shall deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall put you to death, and you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then shall many be scandalized, and shall betray one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and seduce many. And because iniquity hath abounded, the charity of many shall grow cold. But he that shall persevere to the end, he shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world, for a testimony to all nations. And then shall the consummation come. When therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, he that readeth, let him understand. Then they that are in Judea, let them flee to the mountains. And he that is on the housetop, let him come down to take anything. Let him not come down to take anything out of his house. And he that is in the field, let him not go back to take his coat. And woe to them who are with child, that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in the winter or on the Sabbath. For there shall be then great tribulation, such as hath not been from the beginning of the world until now. Neither shall be. And unless those days had been shortened, no flesh should be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days shall be shortened. Then if any man shall say to you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, do not believe him. For there shall arise false Christs and prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch as to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told it to you beforehand. If therefore they shall say to you, Behold, he is in the desert, go ye not out. Behold, he is in the closets, believe it not. For as lightning cometh out of the east, and appeareth even into the west. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Wheresoever the body shall be, there shall be eagles also gathered together. And immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the power of heaven shall be moved. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven, which with much power and majesty. And he shall send his angels with a trumpet and a great voice, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the farthest parts of the heavens to the utmost bounds of them. And from the fig tree learn a parable. When the branch thereof is now tender, and the leaves come forth, you know that the summer is nigh. So you also, when you shall see all these things, know ye that it is nigh, even at the doors. Amen, I say to you, that this generation shall not pass till all these things be done. Heaven and earth shall pass, but my words shall not pass. But of that day and hour no one knoweth, not the angels of heaven, but the Father alone. And as in the days of Noah, so shall also be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving marriage, even till the day in which Noah entered into the ark. And they knew not till the flood came, and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two shall be in the field, one shall be taken, and one shall be left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be taken, and one shall be left. Watch ye therefore, because ye know not what hour your Lord will come. But know this, ye, that if the good man of the house knew what hour the thief would come, he would certainly watch, and would not suffer his house to be broken open. Wherefore be you also ready, because at what hour you know not the Son of Man will come. Who, thinkest thou, is a faithful and wise servant, whom his Lord hath appointed over his family to give them meat in season? Blessed is that servant, whom when his Lord shall come, he shall find doing so. Amen, I say to you, he shall place him over all his goods. But if that evil servant shall say in his heart, My Lord is long coming, and shall begin to strike his fellow servants, and shall eat and drink with drunkards, the Lord of that servant shall come in the day that he hopeth not, and at the hour that he knoweth not, and shall separate him, and appoint his portion with the hypocrites. And there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So a couple things there that are the most relevant. That's such a beautiful chapter also. So powerful. So there's the 2 times that he says, this is happening soon. He very clearly is not talking about 2,000 some years after this. A couple other things I want to emphasize, and I'm going to get into one of these things for a moment. We should take seriously when he says, there shall not be left here a stone upon a stone that shall not be destroyed. Now, does this look like there shall not be a stone upon a stone? These are stones upon stones. This is an easy one. This is not the old temple. I don't know if the Jewish people know that. Perhaps they made a decision to pretend that it is so that they could have, a place to worship, a place to sort of emphasize their history, to represent their history. But it strikes me that we have another example here of a people, of the Jewish people, claiming that God's word of the New Testament is false. So I just thought I would share that. Now, There was something else that I wanted to mention as well. Oh, the sun being blotted out. Let's find that really quick, because this is really important, and it gives us something to go on here. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. The stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be moved. Worst day in world history. Sun blotted out. So here's a real event. Volcanic winter of year 536. Now, that date doesn't make sense, because I'm claiming that I'm not claiming, I'm reading the Bible, which says that the tribulation that he just described, the persecution, all these things, and the sun being blotted out happened shortly after Christ's ascension. Here we have the volcanic winter of 538. The most severe and protracted episode of climate cooling, of course they put in those terms, in the northern hemisphere in the last 2,000 years. Volcanic winter was caused by at least 3 simultaneous eruptions of uncertain origin, with several possible locations proposed for the various continents. Modern scholarship has determined that in early AD 536, or possibly late 535, they're so precise, an eruption ejected massive amounts of sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. So this was that. And what we're proposing is that there's a number of really extreme events between the ascension and this volcanic winter. The fall of Rome, some giant wars, the destruction of the old Roman buildings, most of them. Those buildings built to last 1,000 years, and we're told that the barbaric Germanic tribes, which should already make us suspicious, destroyed these, temples and buildings that were built out of, several tons blocks of marble. So this is just a little preview of where we're going to get to with the timeline being spread out over quite a few more years than what we have been told. And this isn't just me talking. I'm going to play an excerpt of a very brilliant historian who's using all of the best practices of studying history, including looking at tree rings, where you can see, here was a fire during this year and that sort of thing, including using archaeological stratification, where you have layers of sediment and things buried deeper are older and stuff like that. And so we'll get into that stuff. However, for me, and if you believe the Bible is God's word, I believe the most compelling stuff is in this chapter, Gospel of Matthew. So, now, let me give a brief overview of the timeline that we're talking about, and what this theory is. So what we're saying is that within a generation, what the Bible says, after Christ was the tribulation, then that it was followed by the second coming, and then followed by a 1,000-year reign of Christ. So what we're proposing, and I'll speak for myself, is that the fall of Rome happened. The tribulation caused the fall of Rome. The fall of Rome happened shortly after Christ's ascension. This tribulation, we don't know how long it lasted, but we know that it was short enough for a young person who was alive, say the youngest person who was present when Jesus was saying these things. If he lived 100 years, the tribulation would be done by that time. So we're talking early 2nd century, the end of the tribulation and the beginning of the millennial reign of Christ, which was a literal 1,000 years, and ended say in 1100 or something along those lines. That then what happened is Satan was released from his chains. Now, we should bring up the Bible passage. Bible, Satan chained. This is in Revelations. The context of this is, I believe, he's describing that when Christ, after he was crucified, went into the underworld and defeated Satan. So then John, who wrote about this, had a vision of what happened in this, among other things. And he says, "Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven. He had in his hand a key to the hole without a bottom. And he had also a strong chain. He took hold of the dragon, that old snake, who is the devil or Satan, and chained him for 1,000 years. The angel threw the devil into the hole without a bottom. He shut it and locked him in it. He could not fool the nations any more until the 1,000 years were completed. After this, he must be free for a while." That is Satan's little season. And that is the time period that I believe that we're in. Now, I have been thinking this for a while, but until my recent research, there was something I couldn't square about this, which was this. If the millennial reign lasted until what we call 1100 AD, and it is 2025, then that's not little. 1,000 years is not little. Now, the context of this specifically is the 1,000-year reign. So we have a 1,000-year reign, and then we have free for a while. So we can assume that the Satan's little season would be short enough that it would look little compared to 1,000 years. I would say that would be, up to maybe 300 years. I guess 350 seems like it would be pushing it. I'll read the next. I'll read the rest of this because this is everything from the crucifixion to the end of the world. He says, "Then I saw thrones. Those who were sitting there were given the power to judge. I saw the souls of those who had been killed because they told about Jesus and preached the word of God," to the martyrs. "They had not worshipped the wild animal or his false gods. They had not received his mark on their foreheads or hands." And so the mark of the beast, that would have happened during the tribulation. We propose that Nero was likely to have been the Antichrist. He was the Roman emperor who oversaw the martyrdom of so many people and many of our saints. They lived again. So the martyrs lived again and were leaders along with Christ for 1,000 years. The rest of the dead did not come to life again until 1,000 years were finished. This is the first time many people are raised from the dead at the same time. That's referring to the martyrs who lived again. Then he says, "Those who are raised from the dead during the first time are happy and holy. The second death has no power over them. They will be religious leaders of God and of Christ. They will be leaders with him for 1,000 years." That, we believe, is referring to the martyrs and saints. When 1,000 years are finished, Satan will be free to leave his prison. He will go out and fool the nations who are all over the world. They are Gog and Magog. He will gather them all together for war. There will be as many as the sand along the seashore. They will spread out over the earth and all around the place where God's people are, and around the city that is loved. Fire will come down from God out of heaven and destroy them. Then the devil who fooled them will be thrown into the lake of fire burning with sulfur. The wild animal and the false preacher are already there. They will be punished day and night forever. Then I saw, so that's at the end of Satan's little season. Then we have the final judgment. Then I saw a great white throne. I saw one who sat on it. The earth and the heaven left him in a hurry, and they could be found no more. I saw all the dead people standing before God. There were great people and small people. The books were opened. That's exciting. Then another book was opened. It was the book of life. The dead people were judged by what they had done as it was written in the books. The sea gave up the dead people who were in it. The death and hell gave up the dead people who were in them. Death and hell. Each one was judged by what he had done. Then death and hell were thrown into the lake of fire. The lake of fire is the second death. If anyone's name was not written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Okay, so that gets into what happens after us, which is everything from Gog and Magog. Where we are is here. When 1,000 years are finished, Satan will be free to leave his prison. He will go out and fool the nations who are all over the world. Now, don't we live in that? And we should be skeptical of everything I'm saying here, but we should believe in the Bible when it says that the devil will fool the nations. So what we were proposing, I'll go back to laying out the timeline here. Christ comes to live and die and be resurrected. He tells people about the coming tribulation, which is going to happen very soon, and the second coming and the millennial reign and these other things. So I need some water. Maybe I'll go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play something. I don't need that. I'm going to play an introduction to this, and while I go use the bathroom and get some water, I'll be able to hear it, so I'll be listening with you. And and then I'll be back.
Hello and welcome to my channel. In this first video, I'll give a brief introduction on my point of view regarding the subject of Tartaria. This channel will be for those who are already well acquainted with the mysteries of the old world, or what we have come to call Tartaria. I found this emerging area of research incredibly fascinating and at the same time extremely frustrating, as none of us could seem to put forth a comprehensive theory regarding our past. Another layer of our reality had fallen completely apart, and there was no alternative to cling to. My new obsession with the old world sent me down many new avenues of thought, often researching individual structures abroad or in my own backyard. I was continually amazed by the fact that every single old world style building in every city in the world had its own individually crafted fake backstory, which altogether amounted to one all-encompassing lie. Whether it is the mud flood, the strange old maps, Antiquitech, star forts, orphans, giants and impossible buildings, or the so-called reset people, the subject of Tartaria never ceases to captivate the mind of the truth seeker.
got such good images for her videos. I don't know who this is, if anyone can find her.
As we have discovered and then meticulously examined the evidence, what we can clearly see is sufficient proof for an advanced, highly sophisticated civilization whose achievements surpass ours today. In addition, we have uncovered a large effort to hide the truth of our past, an effort that is so large it is beyond human imagination and can only be understood by taking a personal journey into our fraudulent history. After quite a bit of research and intense thought on the matter, I now believe that what we are looking back on is indeed the millennial kingdom or messianic reign of Jesus Christ as prophesied in the Bible. Not only have we been lied to about our past, but we have also been tricked into thinking that we're on a different part of the overall timeline. The vast majority of Christians today believe that the prophecies in the Bible have not been fulfilled regarding the tribulation and the second coming of Christ, and that, therefore, the millennial kingdom is yet to come. However, by researching the past through a new lens, it has become clear that this millennial kingdom period has already come and gone, and our true place in time is much different than we thought. Perhaps some of you interested in eschatology have contemplated what the millennial kingdom would be like. What would the world look like if mankind were not oppressed by the evil one? What could we accomplish if we did not have to waste our energy continuously pushing back against forces who only wish to destroy? Now we don't have to leave so much up to our imagination. The millennial kingdom is not our future, it is our past. Regarding life during this time, there is a great treasure trove of information in the paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, architecture, and all other surviving artifacts. As we explore this wealth of clues from a new perspective, we will find many of the answers we have been looking for, and inevitably, just as many new questions. While there are still a great many mysteries surrounding our history, there's only one general theory that provides a solid foundation for making sense of our past. The Old World, or what we have colloquially called Tartaria, was the millennial kingdom prophesied in the Bible. Therefore, it is a prophecy that has long been fulfilled. It was a time when a large group of normal humans, like us, were ruled over by Jesus Christ himself and a select group of people called saints. It was 1,000 years of Christ's rule which extended both spiritually and literally across the entire earth. On this channel, I will provide evidence to substantiate these claims, as well as show how the timeline deception is the key to unraveling many of the mysteries that have long eluded us. Thanks for watching.
Okay. Turn this down. I'll let that keep playing. Beautiful imagery. So yes, that is the basic idea. I did not get this from this video. I only came across this video recently. But yeah, just to lay out the timeline here. Christ comes, he ascends, he tells his followers that the tribulation is right around the corner and the beginning of his millennial reign. So from approximately 34 AD to 74 AD, the tribulation begins, including the sun becoming black as sackcloth and the stars of heaven falling to the earth. We believe that is this volcanic winter, which they say is in 536, but our timeline has been altered. After the tribulation, we have the second coming and the millennial kingdom. Christ said he would return in their lifetimes, in some of their lifetimes, And the beginning of the Millennial Kingdom, starting around 74 AD, peace and abundance are markers of the Millennial Kingdom. And I think it would, to build buildings like this, it would definitely require peace and an abundance. And I believe it would require a great deal more peace and abundance than what we were told was going on during these periods when these buildings were built. So the end of the Millennial Kingdom comes around 1074, and Satan's little season begins. So then we get to the issue that I mentioned, which is that 1,000 years is not little. What we believe is that at this time, as Satan returns and is able to resume deceiving the nations, and people say, too many people have to be in on it, right? How could you do this through the whole world? Satan deceives the nations of the world, all of them. And Satan is a powerful being. He is, ultimately going to lose, already has lost, and our God is victorious. But he can do some things. And so what he did was insert approximately 700 years into the timeline, and they spread and men helped with this, certainly. We were talking about the fabrication of the stories of many of these beautiful buildings, how it doesn't add up. A lot of that was done by the Freemasons, who have a worldwide network where they run local governments. And so local governments were the ones in charge of creating the backstories for these buildings. And they're a totally hierarchical, top-down command style organization that's totally secret. So they would be the ones to do it. And, who they work for, who's in between them and the devil himself is a different topic. So they stuck 700 years in to make it, so say it's 1100, say it's 1150, we're now at the year 1800. And this is probably the most remarkable part of this story, is how they would have accomplished that. I admit it seems far-fetched. It seems almost impossible. For people who research the Tartaria stuff, and she mentioned the reset people. There's some really cataclysmic stuff going on in the 1800s, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on. And she mentioned the reset people. There's these videos of 1800s cities, and they're just bizarre. Photos of big cities with no one in it. Like this. People that look out of place. Orphan trains. Tons of orphans. Giant mental asylums. Tons of people in mental asylums. Start getting clues of maybe how this was done. So what that means is we could be more like, say, 1,200 years after the death of Christ, rather than closer to that than 2,000 years. Sounds crazy, but we're going on the Bible here. And yes, we are extrapolating a bit. We were trying to figure out these mysteries. So that's a basic idea. That's the timeline. We've talked about the biblical evidence for some of this. We'll get into some of the challenges of this. So for me, the challenges are much more in the writings of the early church fathers, the hagiographies, which are the biographies of the saints, the early ones written. The ones that are before the year 400 are referring, saints believed in a literal 1,000-year reign, and they're referring to it in the future tense. This will happen. So if it hadn't started in the year 400 that throws things off. The people can't be alive for 400 years, although maybe the people who get their saint resurrected bodies could be. So that had led me to deep dive on some of these hagiographies and the writings of the early church fathers. And what I'm proposing is that the dates in which they lived are off, which is consistent with our view that 1,100 years of history was spread out over 2,000 years of history or thereabouts. So I had a remarkable experience the other day talking to Grok, and we can recreate it here, because I was trying to pin down how do we know what dates these people lived. So I was looking at St. Anthony the Great. So let's just watch how this happens. When did St. Anthony the Great, let's say, when did he die? 356 AD. Now, he specifically referred to the 1,000-year reign as something that was going to happen, hadn't happened yet. So I'm proposing that the millennial reign began in around the year, say, 100. So he should be right in it. It should be really going by this time. So I ask, how do we know? Let's see if it said, by the way, answer all of the questions very briefly. He was St. Anthony the Great, incredible. The Athanasius of Alexandria, it says right here, he wrote the book on him, the biography. The exact date of his death is based on historical accounts, particularly from the biography written by St. Athanasius of Alexandria. Watch this, which states that he lived to the age of 105 and passed away in his hermitage. Okay, so did Athanasius say what year he lived and died? Okay, so he didn't specify, but he implied that he was born around 251 and died around 356 based on his age at 105. How did he imply? Be specific. He states that Anthony lived to be 105 and died after a long life of asceticism. It doesn't give precise dates, but notes Anthony began his monastic life around the age 20, shortly after the death of his parents, which scholars estimate around 270 to 271. Okay, so now we went from St. Anthony as saying so to now scholars estimate, right? So Athanasius did not say what year. And just something to note, the AD system did not exist until I believe it was the 900s. There was the ancient Hebrew calendar that starts with Abraham that the Jews use to this day, that a old Roman historian used to try to date things for posterity, and then modern historians have mapped his calendar onto ours. So there's wiggle room here, it seems like. Okay, so scholars, where'd that go? Scholars estimate. So how do scholars estimate that? So with historical context, Athanasius says Anthony began his ascetic life shortly after his parents' death around 20, during a time when Romans' persecution of Christians was waning. So in my view, this Roman persecution of Christians was the tribulation, and it was waning in 200 years almost earlier than this, under Emperor Gallienus. So this is how they're estimating this person's life, is they say, well, he was persecuted by Gallienus, and that was 260 to 268 AD. So I'll say, how do we know when Gallienus was emperor? What up, Chunky? We know Gallienus was emperor from historical records, including Roman chronicles like the Historia Augusta. So this sounds really solid, right? He ruled as a co-emperor from blah, 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 to blah, 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 then as sole emperor until 268, corroborated by contemporary sources like the works of... Okay, so now we got to say, did these Roman emperors give precise dates? Or is this interpreted by later historians? Roman emperors like Gallienus didn't typically record precise dates. Their reigns are dated by later historians. For Gallienus, his co-rule with Valerian and sole rule are inferred from these indirect records, refined by cross-referencing with chroniclers like Eusebius. Okay, so what did Eusebius say exactly about when Roman rulers ruled? Thanks for joining, Chunky. This is a fun one. Eusebius doesn't provide exact day-to-day dates, but organizes their reign by years, often tied to significant events or Olympiads. For Gallienus, he notes his co-rule with Valerian began in the 229th Olympiad, around 253 AD. So, okay. How do we... And you guys will get the point here shortly. Emperor Nero, whose name is 666 or 616. Yes, the numerology of Nero is the number of the beast. How do we know the 229th Olympiad was around 253? It's dated to then because the ancient Greek Olympiads were 4-year cycles starting in 776 BC. Historians calculate each Olympiad by counting forward. Eusebius and others adjust them to align with Roman consular years and events, placing it there. So we're going all the way back to 776 BC and then putting the order of the Roman rulers, and then the modern historians are interpreting that. This went a different direction the last time I did it, where it said, well, we know, we said, well, St. Anthony lived during the rule of such and such, and that was this date. I said, well, okay, how do we know that was this date? They say, well, he was after this Roman ruler, which was this date a few years before. I said, well, how do we know that? And it goes, well, that was because he was after this. And I was like, where is all this coming from? And nobody was writing what the dates are. So there's at least some wiggle room, and I don't find it preposterous, the idea that when, our modern historians have interpreted all of this to say that St. Anthony was in 356 AD, and more accurately, he died in, say, 156 AD, which would put him right in our time frame here. So, but I will say this is a challenge, because I tend to trust these hagiographies and the early church fathers, absolutely. Nero persecuted Christians for 3.5 years, the tribulation after the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. My man, you are on top of this, bro. I love that. Okay, so that's one challenge, though, is we got to dig into what the early church fathers were saying about this and look into if their dates could be off. And so far, to me, it looks like there's absolutely room for the dates to be wrong there. What we know is correct is the Bible, and the Bible says who was the Roman emperors then. And the further away we get from that, the less information we have. Because we have Satan deceiving the nations when he's released 1,000 years later. Another challenge, of course, is the mainstream timeline and the academic work that people have done in studying history. And while we do, while it's easy for me to accept that there have been liars, there also have been, and that those liars can be elevated to high places and the truth can be hidden, and we've seen this all over the place. There also are certainly, well-meaning, intelligent people very passionate about history doing this research. So one thing we should be able to find is historians that are saying things similar than that we're saying. And what would be particularly valuable would be historians who aren't coming from the same place we are, of where they're believing the Bible first, but are just studying history and finding problems with it. So I'm gonna show you a video in just a second. Actually, let's just do that right now. I'm going to show you a piece of this. This is an hour lecture. I highly, highly recommend this video. Gunnar Heinsohn, the Toronto Conference 2016. This is the Understanding Conspiracy channel. I'm a big fan so far of this guy's work. And let's see what he has to say. So this guy, he is, I'm not sure his religious background, but it's clear from this. Sorry, I don't know what's going on. Well, so far, we seem to be on the same page if you understand that the tribulation was during that time period, which Jesus himself said it was going to be. I'm talking about the little season, Satan's little season, and post-millennial eschatology, the idea that the millennial reign of Christ already happened. So, this guy, I don't know if he's believes in God. My sense was that he believes in God and is sort of sympathetic to Christianity, but he's certainly not approaching this from a religious point of view, and it doesn't seem that religion plays a big part in his view here. He has an explanation for where this time discrepancy came from, which I'll talk about after this. Let's let him cook for a second.
The theory goes that enemies, barbarians, mostly Germanic tribes, destroyed the Western Roman civilization. Yet it's very difficult to imagine how human beings could make entire cities disappear under mud, sand, or water. The 6th century crisis is the most meticulously researched. Since 1984, theories are put forward. They are mostly focusing on volcanoes, Volcano Rabaul, Volcano Krakatoa, Volcano Tierra Blanca, and some unknown, unidentified volcano in North America. Since 2009, comets are taken into account, and in 2016, even for the 10th century. And the only agent so far considered is volcano Elgia on Iceland. Volcanoes Katla and Vatnajökull also exploded. 18 million cubic kilometers of lava were released, and 450 million cubic kilometers of sulfurous aerosols covered the northern hemisphere. This was big. If it was big enough to touch all the way down to Iraq and far west to the Yucatan, I cannot imagine. I think it must have been a byproduct of something bigger. Now, if you start doubting that we are dealing with 3 different strikes with very little overlap, if you believe it may have been just a single strike, of course, you are confronted with chronology. The strikes are divided over 700 years, and to imagine the 3 strikes as just one will force you to cut 700 years out of the first millennium. This sounds bizarre. It sounds just impossible. So when I started to understand the chronology of the first millennium, what struck me most is that from antiquity, 1st to 3rd century, to late antiquity, 4th to 6th century, and then to the early Middle Ages, 8th to 10th century, you always have the same architecture, the same Roman basilica architecture. There is no evolution whatsoever in the arts, in the sciences, in the architecture, as I said, and moreover, in the language too. Latin of the 2nd century is indistinguishable from Latin of the 9th century.
So
it's very strange, because before antiquity and after the early Middle Ages, you have evolution, you have changes. Within the periods, you have evolution. But between the periods, you have a standstill of cultural evolution that just appears to be absolutely impossible. So what to do? You ask yourself, is there any side in Europe or in the Near East, is there any side where you have traces of these 3 steps of civilization: antiquity, late antiquity, early antiquity? If you have them anywhere superimposed on top of each other, you have a stratum for antiquity, one from late antiquity, and one for the early Middle Ages, superimposed on each other.
This
so
is
when you
so
have
much
the
of
10th
the basis
century,
of archaeology.
you dig down and you find the 5th century or 6th century, and you dig down and you find the 2nd and 3rd century, always with this type of architecture. If you look for such a site, the selection is immense. So we know about 5,000 Roman towns and cities, 20 to 25,000 large agricultural estates, Villa Rustica. And further east, we know about at least 5,000 Chernyakov sites. They are outside of the empire. They are located about here. So we are looking at least 35,000 sites to find those that have these 3 periods: antiquity, late antiquity, and the early Middle Ages superimposed on each other. And when I started looking, I thought there would be thousands. Then I thought there would be hundreds. And then I thought there would be maybe 50. Now I know there is not a single such site. And it's not a result I decided upon myself, but it is the result of asking many, many experts. So
just to summarize that, there are 3 cataclysmic things that happen in our history. They are in the 3rd century, the cataclysm. They still haven't found a solution to the problem that survivors took some 700 years to move out of the rubble and start rebuilding. Then we have in the 6th century, which includes that volcanic time of darkness that's referenced in the Bible as happening right after, during the tribulation, right after Christ's life. Scholars dating the cataclysm to 6th century, using ice cores, tree rings, and retro calculations, still have to find a solution to the problem that survivors at Constantinople, for example, took some 400 years to move out of the rubble and start rebuilding until after 930s CE. I'll say AD. Then the 930s one, he said there's no written sources of this. And same thing, survivors took 400, even 700 years. So what he's saying is, if these are 3 separate incidents, then using stratigraphy, we should be able to find layers of the three different periods. And he says that it's already suspicious because there's no change. These three different periods are culturally the same, they're architecturally the same, the language is the same. And then he says there's not a single site where there's the correct stratigraphy. All three of them are in a layer that's demonstrable at all. So this guy, like I said, he's not coming from this from a biblical point of view. He later explains where this extra 700 years comes from. And he says that after this event, no, he says that there was I believe he says in the 1200s, there was another catastrophe, and he describes which one it was and everything, and that people lost track of what year it was, so they started over. So I guess I would put it in the 700s or something. But in any case, the point of that is he had a totally different explanation for where these extra years came in and how this happened. So he's not coming from the standpoint of, we're in Satan's little season, he's deceiving the nations. He's coming from a standpoint of he's studied the history, the stratigraphy, all these problems his entire career. He thinks that people not knowing that this extra 700 years was inserted accidentally placed these three different cataclysms at different times, and they were confused because there was 700 years that they had not accounted for. This is the 614 to 911 AD gap. Not totally sure what you're referring to there. So what that is to say is that there are historians that are finding the same evidence independently as what we're talking about. There's a lot, it solves a lot of issues actually that we have with our current timeline. And being somebody, I have a degree in anthropology, we did a lot of archaeology classes and stuff, and I've been studying this stuff on my own ever since then. So for 20 years I've been digging into this stuff, and I've traveled to see ancient ruins of Mexico and Central America and in Israel. And there have always been things that don't make sense, that don't add up. There's always been these great mysteries. And so to me, this, it's still mind-bending, the idea that we could be in a very different year than we thought. But it starts solving a lot of problems. So let's talk about some of that. The first 5 centuries, actually the first to 15th centuries, have a lot of gaps and contradictions beyond what we've discussed. Theological misalignments, lack of cataclysmic evidence and other evidence. But we also, it's just the flow of history. What we're proposing is way more coherent of a story. And I'll get into that more. Now, archaeologically, we have continuity. From the time of Christ to 1,000 years later, we have, that's kind of what I'm saying is the flow. So I'll get into that. Having a connection issue, perhaps. Okay, no, I'm good. It kind of hops off and on again sometimes. There's these inconsistencies, like there's the dark ages, but the Hagia Sophia is built right in the middle of them, and it's spectacular, right? There's a lot of buildings that are built, in the 500s, what we're told, which should be just the time of war and famine and death, and that's not what we see. So our timeline gives us an archaeological continuity. And the part of my notes is a little bit hard to follow, so let me just keep going. So here's a natural historical flow. Jesus comes, there is the tribulation afterwards. The tribulation causes the fall of Rome, the destruction of the old temple, these volcanoes go off, all the martyrs happen, all the persecution happens. There is a war with Nero as the Antichrist against the Christians. and tons of martyrs happen, and then Christ returns. This is the second coming. Defeats Nero and his armies, and a lot of stuff has been destroyed, and he starts building the millennial kingdom. So from then, basically what we're taught is, so you just skip the Dark Ages, and what we're taught as the Holy Roman Empire, which certainly exists, starts right away. And we right away start building and expanding the kingdom of Christ, and building beautiful buildings, and their knowledge and know-how of how to do so increases linearly. So, of course, world history is complicated and there's a lot going on. It's not just Europe. We have Islam, and we have the Jewish people who also kept good records. And we also, I have, my feeling is with China is that they were so separate from the West that it hardly, they don't really touch each other. But with Islam, this guy goes on to say that there's this conundrum in the history of Islam where they're doing amazing things, and then all of a sudden they stop doing anything. Like they're building amazing architecture, and then there's this period of like 700 years where they don't advance at all. And then all of a sudden they start advancing again. Another mystery, so this clears that up. Another mystery is where the Ashkenazi people came from. There is a historical record of the Jewish people up until around 700, and then there's no record of Jewish people anymore until like 1400. So this is solving a lot of issues. So yeah, for Islam, there's a golden age from the 8th to 14th century, and before that there's 700 years where they're not doing nothing. So we basically get rid of all these awkward centuries where nothing happens. We line up some catechisms to be the same event, and it all starts fitting together. So what happens next is the little season ends. And this gets pretty exciting. I understand that sometimes people have a hard time with this on an emotional level because they've been anticipating the millennial reign as something to look forward to. And I can totally understand that. However, what we have to look forward to, and have always had to look forward to, is the new heaven and new earth. So that happens at the end after final judgment, at the end of the little season. And if the little season is little, then it shouldn't be much more than 250 years. And if the reset happened around 1750, which it could have, then we could be getting towards the end of it here. We could live to see the end of Satan's little season. And that being in a different part of the timeline means we have to look for different signs than maybe we thought, because a lot of people are looking for the signs of the tribulation occurring. And I will put it to you that it's quite possible that Satan, who has deceived the nations, is intentionally giving us false signs that the tribulation is coming, because he wants us to stay in this paradigm. And it becomes like we have to use our discernment here, because what happens next, if we're mistaking it for something else, we could be deceived. We could mistake the return of Christ for the Antichrist, which already happened. So the signs we're looking for is Satan gathering the nations for a final rebellion against God with Gog and Magog. Now, my understanding is Magog is representative of either the nations in general or a particular nation that will be leading this, which could be, it could be a number of different people. And Gog is the leader of that. And he might be a human being. He might be more of a spiritual entity. I don't know. But I'll just read this line again. When the 1,000 years are over, Satan will be released from his prison and will go out to deceive the nations. Okay, we are here. in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, and to gather them for battle. So he's gathering the nations for battle. In number, they are like sand on the seashore. There's a lot of people in the world right now. Gog and Magog, symbolic or more literal, of nations opposing God, possibly literal regions. So we're looking for signs of a global deception, war, false ideologies. Things like Project Bluebeam could be part of this. And Satan gathers them together to attack the camp of the saints. Now, this is a very interesting concept, the camp of the saints. It's only mentioned, as far as I know, once, maybe a couple of times. There's also a famous controversial book of the same title. They marched across the breadth of the earth and surrounded the camp of God's people. This is sometimes translated as the camp of the saints. The city he loves, but fire came down from heaven and devoured them. So this could be a faithful remnant. It could be possibly the city of Jerusalem, although it's not looking like a faithful remnant so much these days. There are some who theorize that the mythical city on the North Pole is maybe not so mythical. Where did Jesus go and the saints go at the end of the reign? Now, they could have gone to heaven, but they could be on the earth still. And it's possible that they are here at the North Pole. Now, what we're told is at the North Pole is Santa and his workshop. There's this movie, what's it called? Red One. It's actually a fun family movie. And it depicts the North Pole as like a city that has like a cloaking device on it, and we can't see it. And it's pretty cool how they do it. This might be pretty cool. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie.
Come on, man. Clock's ticking.
So here they're not at the North Pole yet. There's like an airplane hangar. Santa sleigh is awesome. They're flanked by fighter jets. Light speed engage. Oops, sorry, that's Where's Rudolph? Good question. Alright, so here now we're approaching the North Pole. And yes, I am saying the second coming already happened. So here they enter the city on the North Pole.
Home sweet home.
So could be that is this, and this is the camp of saints. Now I'm getting into some wild speculation here. We're just having some fun. But yeah, Chunky, you missed at the beginning. Talking about, we read through all of the Gospel of Matthew 24, and he talks about all these things that are going to happen. There'll be a great tribulation, and he says, then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and he talks about the kingdom being established, and that all of this will happen before they all pass away. We also have chapter 16. What was the quote from that one? 28. So 16, very important chapters. This is where Peter is, his name is changed to Peter. Upon this rock I build my church. This is the establishment of the Catholic Church and the Church of Christ. And 28. Amen, I say to you, there are some of them that stand here that shall not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. So yes, we are hypothesizing that the tribulation came and then the second coming came and Christ came back down and established in the flesh his 1,000-year reign. And it just gets more fun after that. So, I got a couple other things to show you. So we're looking for people who try to get everyone on earth to attack whatever the camp of saints is, and then that'll be followed by the final judgment and the creation of new heaven and new earth. So that we have that to look forward to. Actually, if anything is as exciting or more so than the second coming, it's this. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying of pain, for the old order of things has passed away. Revelation 21, 1 through 4. This is the ultimate hope. So I believe we are nearing the end of Satan's season. It could go on for a while, and in biblical terms, going on for a little while could mean 100 years. We're gonna make sure we're on the right side of all of that, obviously, and mainly that's a spiritual matter, and it's exciting stuff. So I can show you something else. We'll go back to. That's not what I meant. There it is. This stuff. So I'll throw this in the comments here if you want to check this out. This person's videos, they're so beautiful. So this video is on the timeline deception. She gets into some specifics in the timeline. Here we have she calls this the King of Tartaria, and she's talking about Christ's reign on earth. I'll play a little bit of that. The saints in the first resurrection. And so, by the way, everything that I've laid out here, this is very much just an introduction. There's so much more that I could talk about, and so much more that I've yet to learn on this fascinating mystery. Saints in the ruling class. This is one person's research that I've dug into with these videos, and I mentioned earlier, Understanding Conspiracy channel has a few dozen videos on the topic, and he works with a guy who is on X, who I can find. I'll share that with you too. This guy has done a ton of research, maybe the most on this subject. Oh, you gave up X for Lent. Good for you, brother. Well, you maybe save that for in a few weeks here. So, timeline deception, King of Tartaria, the saints in the resurrection. She talks about if the saints perhaps were more than humans who lived very holy lives, but actually were resurrected martyrs, which is really interesting. And this affects some of our timeline difficulties, because if we have saints that are saying things and they're supposedly living in the year 800, these are people who could have been alive for 800 years. And it sounds wild. The saints in the ruling class. So let's just watch some snippets here. All this stuff is really awesome.
Are disguised in our history books as the fall of the Roman Empire, culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Of course, the dates we are given for these events are out of order, which is to purposely deceive us. We are told that the fall of the Roman Empire gradually happened over the course of hundreds of years, when in reality, most or perhaps even all of it may have happened quickly in Jesus' day and culminated in the tribulation. If you're aware of how severely our historical record has been tampered with, then this shouldn't sound too outlandish. So where was the mysterious figure known as the Antichrist in all of this? Well, there seems to be plenty of evidence already compiled by even mainstream sources indicating that Emperor Nero fits the bill of the Antichrist described in Revelation. A quick internet search will yield numerous sources that have already correlated the biblical figure known as the Antichrist to the historical figure known as Emperor Nero.
So Chunky says, aren't we not supposed to know the day nor the hour of Christ's coming? Well, yes, before the second coming, they were told they would not know the day or hour. But if it already happened, it already happened.
I'll probably make a more detailed video about this someday, but in the meantime, you should have no trouble finding resources that back up this claim.
And since you weren't here, Chunky, I'll just reiterate this. Some of the things I share on my channel, I'm sharing with certainty, or at least as much certainty as a mortal man can have. This isn't one of those things. I'm a believer in this. It's certainly not a salvation issue, and it is not Catholic doctrine. And I will talk after this clip about the role of the Catholic Church and how this, my understanding of, as a faithful Catholic who believes that the church is a church of Christ, that they were not in on a deception here. I'll talk about that. But yeah, I do believe in what I'm talking about, but some of it is speculation. But the basic premise I believe, but unlike some of the other things I talk about, like biblical cosmology, I am not 100% on this.
As most of us already know, the tribulation is a horrible calamity that lasts 7 years, where an Antichrist figure rises up and deceives many while unmercilessly persecuting those who refuse to submit to him and choose Jesus Christ. At the end of the tribulation, Jesus comes down out of heaven, an event that is known as the Second Coming. Satan, the Antichrist, and the kings of the earth briefly try to go to war with Jesus, but they are immediately defeated. Satan and the Antichrist are sent to hell, and all of the mortals who were on the side of evil were killed by the sword of Jesus. The people who believed in Christ but survived the tribulation will continue forward in their natural bodies into what is called the Messianic reign or Millennial kingdom of Christ. Now that
Okay, so I want to pause there for a moment because I kind of touched on this, but I didn't talk much about it. We were talking about in Revelations the second resurrection of the dead that would happen at the end of the millennial kingdom. So that would suggest that sometime around the year 1100, there was another resurrection of the dead. And we don't know who those people were or what happened with them. It doesn't say. There's an interesting hypothesis that, so we have the first resurrection of the dead, and those were the martyrs and believers who died during Christ's time. Everyone that lived before them, however, didn't know Jesus because he wasn't there yet. And we understand that for our salvation, we have to believe. So there's a theory, and I found this pretty compelling, that the people who were alive before Christ, who, given the opportunity might believe and be saved, would be resurrected into the earth. So at the end of the millennial kingdom, the Satan comes out, the kingdom, the saints and Christ, and perhaps many or all of the people in the kingdom retreat to the camp of saints for the little season. And the rest of the world would be populated by these second resurrected dead, which would suggest, and this is definitely in the realm of speculation here, suggests that we could be the descendants of those people, the descendants of the second resurrection, which could mean that our, if you go back 300 years, our grandparents would actually be people from before the time of Christ, which is a fascinating thing to think about.
That everyone has been sorted.
I'll skip around a little bit just for fun.
This seems to have happened around 1800 our time, give or take.
Yeah, okay, so this is good stuff. She's talking about when did the current timeline that we're, as we understand it, that we're in the year 2025, when did that deception take place?
Be no way to realistically incorporate this idea into the preterist narrative. However, after examining the multitude of anomalies in our past, I believe a connection can be made between this part of the Bible and what has already been deemed the reset. Thanks to everyone who has researched in the area of alternative history, a sizable amount of data has been collected that seems to indicate that a large group of people were inserted out of nowhere into a glorious pre-existing civilization. This seems to have happened around 1800 our time, give or take up to 50 years. A more precise time frame has not yet been narrowed down. Many videos have been made, while others out there have quietly spent many hours dissecting the earliest video and photographic evidence that is available. The general consensus is that there was something very peculiar going on at this time, and that the people generally seem like they don't quite belong amidst their surroundings. We have found photographs and footage that appear to be faked or staged. Suddenly, there is a multitude of displaced orphans of mysterious origins. We see children working in factories that were clearly never intended for them. We have learned about the creepy infantoriums where one could adopt a living infant from the amusement park. After examining historical records with a new mindset, it seems that a new group of people were inserted out of nowhere. At times, these new people appear to be picking up where a previous group left off. This is the final moment and concludes the great saga of the battle between good and evil on Earth.
All right. So yeah, now I'll address the question of the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church, as we know, has a tremendous amount of books in their library and is not open to the public, and many people are very critical of them for that. And I understand where they're coming from. I always feel as though there is a certain lack of appreciation and gratitude for the Catholic Church for preserving these books in the first place, because as we know, a tremendous amount of knowledge has been destroyed, and whether, of course, I want to be able to read it. I wish it was digitized and I could use AI to search things and all of that stuff like anybody else, but I'd like to propose, let's put forth some questions here. In looking at the Millennial Kingdom, it seems that there are things that are being done that are to prepare the world for us, for the people in Satan's little season, to help us along our way. As knowing, and in God's love for us in the future, knowing people will have to live during this time, he put clues and hints so we could not be deceived too much. So that could be part of the purpose, in addition to glorifying God, of these phenomenal buildings and why they were built to last 1,000 years plus, was that they would serve as evidence that Satan would not be able to destroy them all. And God's church would certainly have a big role in helping the people of today. And if that role was to prevent Satan from deceiving us, it would sort of defeat the purpose of the little season. I believe the little season, the purpose of that is that those of us that didn't know Christ, for us to freely choose him, there'd have to be some challenge to that. And also just a good story, needs a good antagonist. So that the role of the church, the Catholic Church and the Vatican, wouldn't have been, they are supposed to tell us what the truth is. I propose that their purpose, what they were told, the instructions that they were given, was to preserve the sacraments, to preserve the faith, to preserve the history to the best that they could, and to preserve all of these books and all of this knowledge, to save it for when the time was right and it was time for the people to awaken to what the truth is And I believe that would be happening towards the end of the little season, and that's where we are. And I find it very possible that those instructions were given to the popes that reigned during the transition of hold tight and hang on to these books and don't let them out because people aren't ready for it, or the Satan could weaponize that stuff against people, or the timing is important. We need this stuff to come out at the right time as part of God's plan, and that subsequent popes and other people in the Vatican, maybe everybody, forgot what it is. They're right there with us. They're not in on the deception. They've been deceived along with us, and they forget what it is that they are protecting. That all they know is that they've always protected these books, that the people before them didn't let people see it either. And certainly, of course, God would have anticipated that, and perhaps Christ will inspire a pope at some point to let this information that they have out, and that would probably become in the form something like what we're seeing with the JFK files, where it will all be digitized and they will release it to the public via the internet. And so I am praying that, I'm praying for the health of Pope Francis, but sometime probably soon we'll be getting a new pope, and it will be quite something to be alive at the time that the pope would decide to open the Vatican libraries to it all being digitized, and perhaps we will find a lot more evidence that would either support or not support this theory. Do you think St. Malachi's prophecy ties into this? I'm not familiar with St. Malachi's prophecy. It sounds interesting. One of my favorite prophecies is Marie Julie Jeheni, who has not been up for sainthood yet, but I believe will be, and her theories tie in. Let's look it up. Tell me about Saint. Notice, this one. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about this in this context. So this prophecy is St. Malachi wrote a series of short cryptic Latin phrases that purportedly predict the succession of Roman Catholic popes, beginning with Pope Celestine in 1143 and ending with a pope described as Peter the Roman, whose reign would coincide with the destruction of Rome in the Last Judgment. Yeah, interesting angle. He experienced a vision in 1139, so this could have been just a couple hundred years ago, or perhaps this is misstated and it was quite a bit earlier. Yeah, I'll have to learn some more. But yeah, I do remember this, and it's pretty uncanny. So Pope Celestine ex castro Tiberius from the castle on the Tiber, and sure enough, he was born near in a castle near the Tiber River. Yeah, cool stuff. Let's see, the final entry, the 112th, reads, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills, Rome, will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people." The end. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to look into this in this context. So the popes before that point on the prophecy don't confirm the prophecy necessarily. Right. I've heard some doubt because it was released after a few of the popes on the prophecy. Apparently Pope Francis is supposed to be Peter the Roman. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, we'd be real close to the end times if that's true. Yeah, you know what it has had me thinking about a little bit too is like some of the people in power right now. So like Elon Musk is proposing something that sounds an awful lot like the mark of the beast. A chip in your head, and tying it with X, which he's proposing is going to have the ability to do payment processing. Now, according to this theory, we believe that the Antichrist already happened, so it wouldn't be him. And so all of that would have already happened. And it could be that he is part of a group who is wanting to make it look like, and part of the deception of the nations, make it look like we are approaching the tribulation and not end times. It could also be that he's part of a group that's doing good things, which is what it appears to me. Although I don't certainly know Elon enough to trust him. But I have noticed something in that he seems to be hijacking PSYOPs. I think this is the most remarkable thing about Elon. I don't see anybody talking about it. So, and I'll kind of wrap up with this. Elon, first, was a very passionate person about climate stuff. And he made a fortune with Tesla creating electric cars as part of an environmental effort. And he used to talk about how we need sustainable energy, and we need sustainable energy production, and we also need sustainable energy consumption. And so electric cars being a major part of that, and reducing emissions and all of that stuff. And he was kind of the poster child for that, essentially PSYOP. I mean, I'm pro, like, we're all pro clean air and clean water and that sort of thing. But he never was like super doomsday about global warming, which is a PSYOP. But he was in many ways the poster child for clean energy, which was the proposed solution to that. Then he doesn't talk about it anymore, and most people are starting to not believe this anymore. And the left, who are supposedly the champions of fighting global warming, hate him, and they're burning, setting his cars on fire. And so essentially, he hijacked that PSYOP and neutralized it. It like really is not an effective motivator of the left anymore. If it was, they might, have some qualm, if not a moral one, obviously, of attacking that company. So, but then he did that again. His next thing was space. Now, before him and private space stuff, and other people tried with private space, but nobody was successful like him. The space PSYOP was run by NASA, which was founded by occultists and like black magic practitioners, factually, and nobody could touch it. And it was just this black box thing that NASA ran, and whatever they said was gospel for humanity. And now Elon comes along, and so along with that, like they have this PSYOP, they have a fake space station and all this stuff. And so then they can tug at our heartstrings and do all sorts of stuff with the astronauts. They could, have the, what was the tragedy where it blew up and there was like regular people on it. They could do all sorts of stuff as part of their, kind of campaign to deceive people. And now Elon built better rockets than them. And the rockets are real. They go up in the sky and they come back down. They don't break through the firmament. And so now he's the space expert. And so then Joe Biden allegedly left these people on the space station, and Elon rescued him. Well, I don't believe there's a space station up there, so that's fake. But now Elon owns this whole narrative. He stole it from them. Now, and I guess certainly he could just be one of them, and this is just the next phase. But it seems like there's a pattern here of Elon stealing PSYOPs from them. And he's got to have help, He's got to have help. We don't know who they are. So I do find it possible, and his association with Trump and Trump's seeking peace And I'll pop this video on. This is today. Well, actually, that's the long version. Let's do.
Of our Christian faith.
Trump is really aligning himself with Christians, and I just don't see evil in this man at all. I see a heroic, brave, flawed, very human, but sort of larger than life figure. And so I'll play this, and then I'll kind of wrap up with
through your leadership.
What I think might be
You
going on with these
embody
guys.
the values of our Christian faith and love for the gospel. You remind me of the great Roman emperor, Constantine the Great. This emperor, your dear Mr. President, is the one who founded and built the magnificent city of Constantinople, my birthplace, known today as Istanbul. It is my great honor to present you with this holy cross. This cross is the very symbol that led this great Roman Emperor Constantine to victory. As Christ revealed to him in a vision, he said, "En tuto nica," told the emperor, means go with this and be victorious, Mr. President. This cross is an everlasting symbol of peace and an invincible trophy, a sign of divine strength and guidance. With this cross, I pray you bring peace to the world and make America invincible.
So what I see with Trump is, like I said, a heroic figure, and he's aligning himself with Christians in a way that to me seems quite sincere. And so Elon's aligning with him, unless he's planning on backstabbing him, which is possible. Kind of picture I'm getting here is that in this age now, the end of the season, Satan starts losing, and Christianity is making a comeback, and God starts winning, and he starts winning through humans and our actions. And that we all of us believers have a role to play in this. And that part of the point of the little season is for us humans, empowered by our faith, can be victorious against Satan in many respects. And only Christ can truly defeat Satan, and has truly defeated Satan. But that we're not looking at all of the world being deceived and all of the world attacking the camp of saints. We're looking at the non-Christian, the non-believing world. I'm sure plenty of people who think they're Christian and claim to be Christian would be part of that. So, these could be signs of the coming to the end of the little season, and the sort of rise of some Christian leaders. And given that this is the little season, and that we're quite fallen and quite deceived and quite sinful and decadent in our age, we're not going to get a sainted monarch like they used to have. We have we have a real estate developer and a tech geek and a former KGB agent and stuff. But there seems to be some big things happening with the quite a possibility of Russia and the United States making making peace and Christianity playing a part of that, recognizing that we are Christian nations, that Trump and Putin are facilitating. And at the same time, we're hearing these talks of healing the schism, which the patriarch, maybe it might have been this guy. This is the head of the Greek Orthodox Church in America. But I thought it was, I'll look it up. Let's see who it is. Orthodox, there was no schism. We have people saying these tensions are not insurmountable, but just now there was somebody, an Orthodox patriarch, saying that there was no schism. And so the point being that there's efforts to be made to reunify the the Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church. And that happening at the same time of talks of peace between Russia and the United States, and us having, say what you will about some of these guys, but I do definitely believe that Putin wants what's best for Russia and Trump wants what's best for the United States. So it's all pretty, here we go, Patriarch Bartholomew, there was no schism between Rome and Constantinople in 1054. So who is this? Current Patriarch of Constantinople. So yeah, he's quite a bigger figure than what we just saw at the White House with the head of the Greek Orthodox in America Church. Spiritual leader of 300 million East Orthodox Christians. So he's the guy for the East Orthodox. That's the guy. That's like they don't have a pope in the same sense that we do, but he's their version of that. He's saying there's no schism. So yeah, exciting times. I mean, I often look back with nostalgia at the Middle Ages, and obviously quite the more so considering it could have been Christ literally reigning on earth as king. But a pretty exciting time to be alive. The end of Satan's little season, and potentially, whether we see it in this life or in the next, we will be witness to new heaven and new earth. So thank you for watching. Shout out Chunky. Thanks for hanging out with me. God bless you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.